Today is Tuesday, January the 23rd, 2018, and this is a work session of the Pitkin County Board of County Commissioners. We just did a tour of our new building, and we want to thank staff and the construction company for letting us wander through the new building. It's very exciting to see. And Steve Child is out ill today, so we are going to proceed. And the first item is the 2020 census discussion.
Thank you, Patty. Ellen Sassano, Long Range Planning Administrator, right? Yeah, that's my new, that's my title. Thank you.
That's who I am today.
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, the current federal administration is not adequately funding the budget request by the Department of Commerce for the 2020 census. The City of Aspen Community Development staff is working with City Council, as I understand it, to determine to what extent they would like to take action of any kind to influence our congressional delegation to move forward on influencing that budget decision. And so we are coming to you with the same request to determine whether or not you would like to take action either in the form of joining with the City of Aspen or any other counties or municipalities in the region to put together a letter to forward to our congressional delegation, or to work through any of the organizations that of which we are members to influence our delegation or any other entities that may be worth lobbying to take some action on the funding, on this funding issue. That said, I think everyone is familiar with the function of the census, the data that it provides, and how it is used. I'm happy to walk through that, or if you'd like to just jump into a discussion about whether or not you'd like to take action, what form the action would take, and what issues you'd like to raise if we do go forward with a letter or any other kind of discussion at a broader level.
Well, just real quick, and then Rachel, I think from speaking for myself here, going forward with some action, either a letter joining on with the city, and I have a Northwest Cog meeting on Thursday, so I will take this over as part of our general discussion and open it up to those member jurisdictions to see if they're doing, if they're aware, if they've made any efforts, and if they want more information, and I can refer them back to you. Would that be okay? Or is there a key person at the City of Aspen? City of Aspen is a member; they never come to the meeting. So
I would say, yeah, coordinate with me, and I can relate any information to the city, depending on what the board wants to do in terms of action. Yeah,
perfect. Rachel.
Yeah, Ellen, I appreciate you bringing this to us and Cindy so early. I think it's really important. I'm wondering, in a broader sense, what are the timelines? When would they start counting? I know this is the prep period, but is it actually like January 1st of 2020, or they start it in 2019?
I don't know the nuances of when the actual count takes place. I do know there's a lot of preparation leading up to it. It looks. I
might invite Kara to the table, because I think in her research she may have some insight into that.
Okay.
Even better. Thank you.
Hello, Kara Silvernagel. In answer to your question, Rachel, what they do with the census is that there is one hard date, and I believe it's April 20th. I don't know the exact date, but there's one hard date that basically they consider the count. They send out the forms in advance, and so really the big effort is getting the outreach efforts out to those that are getting counted and informing them to complete the forms and get those forms caught up. And so what it looks like in the end of the day is a count on a specific date and time, and then on the back end, there's also an effort on the back end, which is where some of the funding is, to go back and get those that were not counted, because a lot of the regional census areas know where the forms, because each form I think has a barcode or something, And so going back and getting the outreach efforts that if you didn't complete the form, that you still can. And really, a lot of the efforts are to ensure that people understand that it's not submitting their name and kind of the fear factor that goes around with it, but it's an actual date and time. And really, it's at least a year of prep to try and get that outreach effort started.
Okay, yeah, a couple of things. One, for your information, when I was over at the QQ meeting in Grand County not too long ago, I believe the town manager from Grand Lake was there, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, "Do you remember me? I worked on the 2000 census," And I was like, So he might have some insights to the process and the shortcomings and whatever. But so that was one thing that struck me. The other is, I'm not sure about the sequence of this, because right now we want to get the federal government to fund it as they should, period. And so you want to go there. But I think we should, literally be sending a letter to the governor's office and to CCI and to Club 20 and these groups and say, do you realize how important this potential is for us to either lose or gain funding, lose or gain congressional representation, so on and so forth, and make it a broader net than just the counties that we're talking about. I mean, this literally should go to, I don't want to see the, maybe it's necessary, but should we request the state of Colorado backfill any funding to make sure we're adequately counted? And that's where I was asking about the timelines, because if it's not done in this session, it would be next session, and any money wouldn't really flow until May of 19. And so there's a timeline there, and I think that including some issues of the timeline, the urgency, because people just go, 2020, that's so far away, and we know how close it is. So I just think it's more about getting a broader net and what's on the line for undercounted communities, because that way we can get more people lobbying our senators, lobbying our congressmen, that this is an important function of federal government. It's an important function called for in the Constitution, I believe, and that it can't be underfunded and cut the way other departments may be. And it's a once every, it just has to be done. It affects our reapportionment. And that is huge for people on the West Slope. A lot of people are already discussing how do you keep counties together, how do you keep districts together. There's going to be that fair district ballot question potentially on the ballot this November. So again, that was my biggest thought reading through this, is that we have to get the state of Colorado involved as well. And that there may be some stats from health, the Colorado Department of Health, Human Services, and these sort of things, of what these numbers mean to Colorado and how significant it is. Because that's the only way you'll get the general fund of the legislature to justify any expenditures.
Yeah, I think that Rachel's right, but I think we need to be careful with seeing if we can get the state of Colorado to backfund it, because the feds may jump on that right off the bat.
Right.
We'll pay this much, states have to pick
I know,
up
that's why I said the timing is a little
timing.
tricky.
And I would just say real quick, through the Department of Local Affairs with the state and at the demographer's office, they actually have a census person. They've been going around within the state. They have a person specific to the census, specific to the outreach of the census. There is a regional rep with the U.S. Census in Denver. So the state is working really closely with a regional under the capacity that they have. Obviously, the backfilling what's not funded is key, but they are definitely at the table.
And the other item, I can't remember if I mentioned before, but I thought about it, is that Mick Ireland ended up with a lot of experience with census as his time as a county commissioner and city, and just his work on lists. And I think just chatting with him about what are the usual failures, what are the usual shortcomings in the program in our area, would be really helpful to make sure that when we do that cleanup effort afterwards, we get everybody, because as best as I can recall, we get radically undercounted.
George.
So, I mean, this is a national issue, obviously, and I don't want to put too much on our staff's plate in terms of trying to do a lot of this research, but we should be piggybacking off other efforts, as Rachel has said. So certainly, City of Aspen has an initiative going. I don't know if the town of Snowmass Village is going to want to participate, so we can at least jointly do a unified front from Pickens County, and then to utilize the other organizations. CCI, Rachel and Steve are our reps to bring that up there. You got Colorado Municipal League, so you got the mayors to do that. So, we can only do a small part, but it has to build if you want to go statewide using those organizations and support those efforts. But I don't see us driving this effort, obviously, on this national issue, and so that would be my suggestion.
So is the board comfortable, though, with us sending a letter out, joining in, or sending our own as far as to remind Congress that this is a federal issue and that their support, their funding is imperative?
Yeah, and again, I would try to coordinate with the city of Aspen and see if the town of Snowmass Village is doing anything, so we have a unified front for Pickens County with our municipalities, and then we could forward that information on through our reps to CCI and CMI and any other organization.
Colorado ski towns.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will when I go to Cog on Thursday, let them know that so we generate anything with the city and Snowmass that we will see, because they'll put it on their website so people can use it as an example. It's a great avenue for us. Northwest Cog's really into that, regional effort, so I think it's a perfect opportunity. Rachel, Greg, did you?
No.
Okay, Rachel.
Okay, I was just going to say, as we get a little further along, too, I think working with Pat Bingham's office, we could get, and they often provide posters and things, but we may need to do a little of our own. You never know where the cutbacks are going to hit. But if we had posters in all of our facilities that serve the public, like community health or any of the assistance programs, so that it's just on the wall and people can read it, that, this is anonymous, it will not be used for identification, and just start that message early on, not to fear the census.
We should do a grassroots segment at some point, too.
Yeah, or even get a flash up there. Thanks.
Anything else, Eldon, that you?
So staff will draft a letter, and would you like to see the letter before we distribute it to various organizations and to our delegation?
May as well. It's not
I think
that
we should
pressing
we're going to be
time-wise.
sending it out to multiple entities. Just either attach it for open discussion at our next meeting or something that we just get a chance to look at it.
Okay, and I don't know where the city is in their process of determining specific action, but I will definitely check in with them, and hopefully we can coordinate efforts.
Yeah, and if you think there's more power gained if we have multiple signers on one letter rather than send them 4 different from the valley jurisdictions, that's okay too, I think, as long as I think a joint effort would be better.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
So when do we start knocking on doors with pencils in hand?
Well, hopefully we'll have the opportunity to knock on doors with pencils in hand.
Yeah. Hope.
I don't know.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, next item on our agenda is our board open discussion.
And I actually do not have anything for
Oh,
open discussion.
no. Do you have any other open discussion items?
Not that I can think of right now.
Do you have any update? I know it's probably hard for you to talk, but any update on the retreat that we need to know from the last week?
Not really. I visited with Kathy Novak actually this morning to talk about her portion, where it looks like we'll be able to bring Amy Marjoram in via Skype or whatever the technical term, proper technical term is now. So that's come together. So we're starting to now go back and work on the retreat materials for the board. So we are on schedule. Basically, the only change that came out of last time, which we incorporated, and I can just kind of walk you through the first part of the first day agenda, is we're going to start off with a plus delta exercise looking back on 2017, and we may use that to take a little bit deeper dive this year. Then per the board's request, we're going to go ahead and immediately go into looking ahead for 2018, doing some of the review of our primary goals or big rocks in the jar and starting to open up that dialogue about which ones do we see needing to focus on the most, particularly from a process perspective. We'll then go into the presentation with Kathy Novak and kind of her. It's really going to be more of a facilitated conversation about conflict and conflict in public process and how to remain effective as a board when you're dealing with difficult issues. And then we'll have the panel discussion, as we talked about last time. John Bennett will be on that. Amy Marjoram will be on that. Meg Haynes will be on that. Mike Kaplan and Kathy Novak will also be participating there.
And so are we going to come up with some introductory questions or sort of set the stage for the panel members, some questions that we want to sort of draw their experience out on
focus their
so
comments.
I already maybe should have checked in with you guys, but I already took the liberty of doing that with them and kind of teeing up around, really having talking points from their perspective about, good leadership qualities through challenging issues, and also giving them an opportunity, opening up to talk about what they see as some of the bigger issues that the county is going to be taking on and their perspectives on it. And about anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes of opening comments for each speaker, and then going into a conversation from there.
Yeah, maybe what would be interesting, and we could always ask this, but from their experiences, their successes and perhaps not so success, what did they learn? What would they have done differently?
And one of the reasons when John and I were talking about, what we were going to do at the retreat was with Kathy Novak there to help us facilitate the conversation. What we do as individuals to manage conflict on our own level, and then what we can do successfully as a board, how we can work together, and especially in light of some issues we have coming before us this next year. Anybody else have any open discussion items?
I can't think of anything right now.
Oh, is that an open discussion?
Yeah. But our presenter for the Comcast franchise agreement is available early. So note, I'm just going to actually respond to that real quick.
Well, then I'm going to move us into our board open discussion. Our board future agendas.
Yeah. Okay. And I've got a few items. I'm going to ask Cindy to come up on the first one.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to check in with the Board of County Commissioners. I don't know if Steve had directly asked each board member, but April the 6th is a date that CC4CA, Colorado Communities for Climate Action, is planning a time to come to our area for some legislative training, because CC4A really is all about our actions with the legislature in Colorado, and they are offering, as part of the membership, training on legislative issues and how to be effective as an elected official. So initially we thought we might have that meeting April 6th, Friday, April 6th, in the Roaring Fork Valley. But we've been requested by some of the folks who will be coming from the Front Range whether or not that meeting could be held in the Eagle Valley. And I said, I just really wanted to check in with our members, because I want you to make sure that you can attend that meeting if at all possible. So how does it sound? April the 6th, maybe somewhere in the Eagle Valley, such as Vail or Eagle.
Well, if they have it at 8 o'clock in the morning, that means we have to leave here like it's 5:36 in the morning. So I hope they keep that in mind if they're going to shift it.
Who would be attending this?
Excuse me. Other members from around the valley and the Eagle Valley. Basically what kind of this portion of the western slope other elected officials who are members of CC4CA, and then the trainers who have been invited to train on legislative issues. And I can't really remember the names of some
I'm just curious, but I'm just curious. They haven't got the staff or the resources time to do a session over in the Eagle Valley and one in the Roaring Fork Valley. It seems like we probably have more membership or as much membership here in the Roaring Fork Valley as they do in the Eagle Valley.
We've got Vail and Eagle County for sure.
Yeah.
And I think there are a couple of communities, but I can't remember.
But in the Roaring Fork Valley, who are members?
We've got Basalt, Aspen, Snowmass, Pitkin County,
Eagle County.
Eagle County.
Yeah.
Dale?
Yeah.
I believe Carbondale did join.
Yes, I would have them revisit that and have it in the Mid Valley area, in the Roaring Fork Valley.
That's where we originally were going to,
Yeah.
and then they asked the question. So, thanks. I'm glad I checked in, and
That's
I will,
my own personal.
and I'll encourage that meeting to be in the Roaring Fork Valley. And
Either that or, because it's
Or
tough
two
for
meetings.
get up here. Yeah.
They could have a second meeting, maybe, perhaps. How many
Yeah,
of them
but
are
that's a
there?
good discussion.
okay, sounds good. Thank you for letting me know that.
And, you know, John, I had another item. Cindy, you kind of are part of this, but I'm honored to bring forward to the board for the Celestial Appeal. I've asked, and I think Greg is interested in having some kind of an update as to where we stand, you know, where the process is so far. So what are we actually, in terms of, what are we doing at that meeting, the special meeting we're going to have? Just a little background. Greg has not been involved in Celestial at all. I was involved in it years ago. I didn't know how appropriate it was or how we should approach it.
My recommendation, because you'll be acting in a quasi-judicial capacity within that hearing, and so my suggestion would be to schedule something for advice of attorney about the board's roles and the board's responsibilities. During that hearing would probably be the most appropriate.
So if we
way
want to do that
handle it.
ahead of time, I don't know if everybody is interested in that, but I think it's probably something that would be wise for us to have on board before we go into that meeting.
Okay, I'll talk with Rye and Suzanne Wolf, and we'll get back to you.
And I think we had set a date, and it kept moving as a target. Is it still moving as a target?
No, I think.
So it is set for,
I want to say it's April 16th, yeah.
I think it is.
I forget.
Monday. It's Monday, because I know that there were certain
April
parties
16th.
that weren't happy with that date.
Yeah.
But right now, I think that's what we're set for.
April 16th, I believe 9 to 1 was the.
Okay,
the-
with
the
a half an hour break in between. We were going to do a half an hour break so we could have some kind of a snack. Okay.
Yeah, I'll get back to you. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thanks,
I
Cindy.
do have some future agenda items for you. Starting with tomorrow, there are going to be 2 additions to the agenda. The first addition is going to be, we had mistakenly omitted the location, our official posting location, and
Oh, I was wondering
so
about that.
we're going to bring a resolution forward correcting that. We, in the past, have done that, I think, when we've appointed
And where are we officially posting?
the courthouse.
Okay, rather
Yeah.
than the courthouse plaza.
Correct. Yeah, now in the following year, we're doing that this year because the project won't be complete. I'd anticipate that in 2019, the new administration and sheriff's office will be the official
Okay.
posting place.
Do we have an official place, or we just scotch taping to the window?
It's on the front door.
Okay.
The front door is the official place.
Okay.
We also will be adding an emergency ordinance around property acquisitions tomorrow to get board authorization on a contract. So you'll have 2 additions to tomorrow's agenda. Other thing I want to make you aware of, just in case you get questions, we have had a petition submitted from Little Elk Creek subdivision to take over the roads and road maintenance within the subdivision. And so we will schedule a work session with you guys to understand the history around these requests and how the petition process works. But in case you got asked from any of the residents in Little Elk Creek, we have received a letter requesting that the county adopt maintenance of those roads. We'll work on getting a work session scheduled with you to talk about that before.
Currently private roads within the homeowners association?
It's a little more complicated than that, but yeah, they are maintained by the HOA right now. So just in case you get questions, I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. Let's see. And then we're going to be looking for a large block, probably at least a 2-hour block of exec time to go over some issues around advice of attorney on airport ahead of the EA coming in. And so that is looking like it, unfortunately, will probably happen after our retreat at this point, but probably later February. So you'll be seeing that pop up.
So our first talk on that was it could be 4 hours, and I mentioned that in exec today.
We may need to break that up a little bit, just looking at our
That's a good
future
idea.
agendas. And that is all I have on future agendas right now.
Does anybody else have? George?
I don't see we've got any time allocated for prep for EAOTC, unless I missed that.
Okay. I don't think you did.
Okay, and then the other question I have is on Feb 13, we have a little work session on governance policy.
Yeah, so what that is, right now we have several documents that the board has adopted that provide direction to the organization, but a lot of it is replicated. So you have board governance policies, you have county code. Sometimes it even replicates what's in the home rule charter. And so we're going to go over those various policies. It's going to be our recommendation to rescind a lot of the governance policies so that that direction only lives one place. And or sometimes you've adopted processes that you may want to have a little bit more flexibility in. You may not want to have them in a specific policy. So for example, the public process for the board is actually set up in one of those board adopted policies, but from time to time the board wants to change the order or such from the DIAs, which really isn't accommodated for in that. So we think that that should be more of an informal working agreement with the board. So we're going to walk through a lot of those kinds of issues and look for direction to bring some of that forward, just to clean up.
All right, let me just, thanks. I'll just backtrack again because I'm just looking at these calendar dates. So we have EAOTC on Thursday, Feb 16, because next week we're not meeting, and the following...
I think it's February 15th.
Thursday, February 15th. And then we have our retreat. So our work session is only a few days before the EAOTC, so it doesn't seem to flow very well if we want to have some sort of input in terms of the agenda.
It is not, our timing is not working out well. That's true, George.
For the EAOTC agenda.
Yeah, and our prep in this case would probably be more of a review of an agenda that has been set. I can tell you I did sit in on a meeting with staff to propose an agenda. There's some updates that are anticipated if they're ready. RAFTA's, I've forgotten the ISTP. Thank you. We're hoping that they'll be ready to provide the EAOTC an update on that. In terms, well, we also are looking at bringing a regional transportation planner up from another community. They're going to be talking to staff that morning. We thought it would be a good opportunity to maybe talk to the board about that role and that function and how it works in at least another county. We anticipate bringing back the question of the Buttermilk Underpass study, which was
Funding?
Yeah, a question that we had asked be revisited after the last EOTC.
And I think we shouldn't call it the underpass study anymore because we determined that there really isn't going to be an underpass, right?
No.
Money-wise?
Looking at all the options for that intersection, I
Right,
think.
right
Okay.
now.
I thought we were looking at more narrowing down to how a trail can connect with the existing underpass.
So what we'd be looking at is feasibility options, and so that could include, yes, a trail connecting Buttermilk to the existing underpass in front of the inn at
So
Aspen.
it still can include that.
Yeah, it could even be looking at, do you cross Owl Creek and use the underpass that exists at the airport, or is it more feasible to, again, look at an underpass right at that intersection? So it's more of an alternatives analysis and feasibility study.
Yeah, no, I really, maybe my memory's failing, but I thought that Brian had kind of presented that given the grade changes from either side of the road and the utilities there, it just looked like a project beyond
No,
reasonability.
your memory is correct, but it's really based on our experience in the corridor, and we haven't studied it from an engineering perspective. And so
Okay.
our thinking is it's worth looking at what alternatives are available for grade separated crossing that would serve Buttermilk. And as you pointed out, Rachel, there's probably 2 or 3 options there, and that feasibility study will flesh out in a little bit more detail.
And just some basic
those
safety
questions.
improvements.
Yeah,
But we did not want to go where you're remembering the discussion, as I recall it, is absolutely correct. And what we had originally had in the EOTC budget was dollars to design an underpass. And that's
Okay.
what we pulled back and said, we should do a feasibility study and make sure this is the best option first.
And what might be interesting as part of that discussion is for the our city partners to talk about their mobility lab and in terms of how they envision the utilization of the Buttermilk parking lot, which would directly correspond to perhaps a future need to have some sort of pedestrian bike access, safe access at that intersection.
And I think that may be the other update we get at the EOTC. The city did recently announce that most aspects of the mobility lab were going to be delayed until 2019. And I think some of that is a result of the city not having all of the funding commitments from partners, and so they're still working on the scope. So they may need to know that to answer some of those questions on
Right.
that. Yeah.
Snowmass is hosting. It's in Snowmass, correct?
Yes, correct.
And Greg, you will be chairing for the board because I won't be here.
Okay.
And I will not be there either because that's a CCI meeting date.
What about Steve?
Oh, boy.
Steve will be, we can have him stay at the E
Understanding,
EOTC.
I think we had a quorum last we checked anyway.
Yeah.
It's at Snowmass this time.
But we'll double check with Steve.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, how soon would we invite, regarding this planning, I know at some point ski company was approached. I think the last meeting I remember hearing that ski company had no interest in really doing anything regarding an underpass. And I'm just wondering, regarding the actual planning for what could happen there is something they should definitely be part of.
Correct. And that's where we think the feasibility study may give us another opportunity to engage partners. Greg, once we have some facts, one of the things we talked about, we're obviously not going to have approval prior to X Games for any study, but maybe trying to look at the crossing numbers and such there. I do think there are definitely times of the year where crossing is pretty significant at that location.
At that spot, yeah. I think I saw them putting Jersey barriers up this morning. I thought it was a car wreck when I finally got there, flashing lights and everything. It was just, they were unloading massive barriers right there. So
Well, they usually have state troopers stationed right there because it is a significant safety issue during X Games.
Yeah, one of the years we had tons of people trying to walk into town
That was when they had
to make sure they
concerts
could get
in
the
town.
concert and the buses
I'm just
were
saying,
too
just
full.
crossing at Buttermilk
Yeah.
is scary. So, Rachel, did you have some comments?
Yeah, I did. again, unfortunately, I'm not going to be there because it's a CCI date, but it ends up that way. And if Steve can stay for this, we'll talk. And I'd like to be in Denver for some of the issues coming up. I noticed that the days I am gone in March are not listed on the agenda. And so we need to make sure.
We'll get those on.
But yeah, especially for the applicants who may want to know if they have a 5-person board or a 3-person board or whatever.
We had you on here.
Yeah, I'm gone. It's just that it's not printed on these. I'm gone Tuesday the 6th, and then of March will not be at that meeting. And then I also, and that was the joint open space and trails. And so we really, I think, wanted to have a full person.
And Steve won't be here for that one either. I think he's got a farmer's thing. So we're already working on moving that
Okay,
date.
good. And then the others are, I will miss the work session of the 20th and the work session of the 27th and the regular meeting of the 28th.
Yeah, you're on those. You're noted on those for not being here.
I didn't see it on mine.
I think there's a.
Maybe you get a better copy.
I get the better copy.
Yeah,
it was in my regular agenda
noted on
packet.
mine. Okay.
Yeah. So we just have this 6th that Rachel, and I think Charlotte's aware.
Okay, there. And Patty, if it's okay to go back for 1 second to open discussion, there was some.
Let me make sure there's no more agenda items. Anybody else have any more agenda items?
Yeah.
We're good? John, you're good? Okay.
Well, in terms of discussion, I was thinking on EOTC, if necessary, if there's things to talk about that we really need information, maybe we should put 20 minutes in on the retreat schedule to make sure that we can have those requests in time for staff to answer them, given what George has said and you've said about the turnaround. So just keep an eye open for that. I mean, I know I saw the announcement that the mobility lab won't happen until summer of 2019, and that starts to say we're not even going to look at improving the entrance or anything on the entrance until 2020. And that, for the citizens I talk to who deal with that problem, it's not enough. And people are very worried, and as George knows well from the mountain TPRs, we don't get that project in soon, we'll be out for another 20 years, in the funding cycles of the state. So I think those issues should be raised at the EOTC. I mean, it's kind of like the whole Upper Valley is waiting on the city to decide what they can do. And I think there's a lot of skepticism out there that will alleviate the need to actually fix the entrance, to put it politely. So
I think that's a good discussion. I
know, but EOTC, if that's not where you bring it up, where do you?
I feel like we've been bringing it up there for 20 years and we still haven't gotten anywhere. So maybe it doesn't hurt to keep bringing it up, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think that conversation could tag on to the city's update on the mobility lab. Yeah. What they're planning for this coming summer and what they're hopefully planning for the following summer, depending on funding.
Yeah, I think that's what they're planning to do. But Rachel wants us to come to specifically talk fixes to the entrance. I just think
it's really worth making a statement, perhaps at some level, from the BOCC that we're just on hold on something that we don't know will even materialize. We don't know if they're going to cancel the 2019 mobility lab because they don't really have the resources or sponsorship, and it's just leaving the future of our transportation needs so far up in the air.
I think we could ask present that. We've already experienced what happens when you have to replace a bridge in the valley and the issues that has arisen, and we know at some point the Castle Creek Bridge is its life expectancy.
They're planning that whole change on the Castle Creek Bridge this spring. So
yeah. We know the CDOT's not going to do anything on their own. So it's something to sort of keep in front.
Yeah, that's
whenever
kind of
we have the opportunity.
What I want to.
Well, I think if anything, it goes to we need to have a special meeting at some point with the jurisdictions on the entrance, which we have not. We talked with the city before, and they said we're done. We're not even talking about it, and we're not talking about going up Merle anymore. We're not talking about the entrance anymore. So that's when they came up with the mobility lab. So I don't really think the mobility lab is going to have any fixes for the entrance. They're just talking about fixing mobility in downtown.
Yeah, well, it's related, but I agree with what you're saying, Patty, and it has been frustrating, but I still come back to, for our constituents, they're still wondering what's going on, and we're stuck, and the only thing to do is bring it up and make the point, and that we're concerned about it. We'd like to see something move forward. We'd like to see Plan B. What is Plan B if mobility lab doesn't happen, or the reduction
I think those are
is
questions
nothing?
that you can clearly ask right at the EAOTC meeting.
I won't be at the EAOTC
Oh,
meeting.
well, I think
That's
George will
why
be
I-
there.
Yeah, no, I'm saying we could do that.
Yeah, I
No,
appreciate
absolutely.
That's right, you won't be there.
The other opportunity is probably when we're talking about regional transportation planning too. So I think there's
Right.
two natural places.
Yeah.
Yeah,
to bring
if
that
we're funding a
conversation up.
regional transportation planner, nothing
That's a
should be
perfect-
off the table.
Right. But I don't think we need to talk about it at the retreat. I think we've just talked about it.
Okay, that's
think we
fine,
have
that's fine.
direction for
I
somebody
just
who's
said if
gonna
there's
be at the
anything
meeting.
else that shows up
Greg
on
will
that
be there on
agenda you
behalf,
really need.
I mean, you and Steve and George will be there, so
Okay,
I think that's a perfect opportunity to, once again, try and open that door.
yeah.
Anything else? Okay, we have no other future agendas. Do we have our next present, Rachel?
Can I go backwards just for 1 second on open discussion? This small detail.
Again? Sure.
Yeah, no, that was a future agenda. But I was at the 1177 roundtable yesterday, and we got an update from the state on finances of water issues in general. The Department of Natural Resources is funded almost entirely from severance tax. And so what we were told is that there will not be any new basin implementation funds replenishing the basin funds in the 2018 budget come June. And that is the fund that is helping everyone with their basin implementation plans to go along with the state water plan to improve water quality or save ag or anything like that. And the reason I really want to bring this up as much as anything is because when we're already seeing proposals to bond the new general fund revenues in the state for transportation with no new revenue source, and 100% of basically all the excess revenue going into that, while we're going to have needs over here, we can't even advance the state water plan, school funding's behind, everything else. So I just wanted to put another arrow in everyone's quiver that as much as we're being told by the state, pedal to the metal, advance these water plans, save us from the next drought that's coming, and at the same time, by the way, we don't have any money unless it's a general fund transfer. And so we may be advocating for that, but it's as much as anything to realize, and we're only one of 7 basins. So this is, it's not a huge number, but it's, $5-10 million that isn't happening to advance another critical Colorado need. And we can't just look at one issue exclusive of others. So just wanted to put that out there when those discussions come up.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
And Patty, we were scheduled for a break. I had suggested
Are they
what time.
gearing up?
What time would Ken be here? He's here. Oh, he's in the library.
About
Do you guys?
5
You
minute
were
restroom?
scheduled for a break. I don't know if you want a break or if you
Well,
want to
let's
go
take a
right
little
in.
5-minute break,
minute.
and then we can set up, and then we can go. Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Grassroots. Grassroots, thank you. Again, this is Tuesday, January the 23rd. This is the Board of County Commissioners work session. We have a last item on our agenda. We're saving the best for the last today. We have the Comcast franchise agreement. So please.
Thank you. Kara Silbernagle with the manager's office, and I have Phyllis Mattias, assistant county manager, as well as Ken Fellman with Kissinger and Fellman PC. So we, the county maintains a franchise agreement with Comcast for access to our right-of-way. That agreement expired December 31st, 2016, and since then we've been operating basically on a month-to-month until we worked through a new agreement. And so what we did in the past, we had a joint agreement, basically with City of Aspen, Town of Snowmass Village, and Pitkin County. Since all of those franchise agreements expired at the same time, we decided to go back into negotiations with Comcast jointly, as well as brought in the Town of Basalt as well. And so we brought in Ken Fellman to kind of help us through that franchise agreement. So he's going to walk through kind of what we've done and where we are today.
And then it's my understanding this agreement comes before us
Tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right. Well, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Just to give you a little bit of background, I'm an attorney. I do mostly local government law, and most of that is telecom, broadband, and utility issues. And while most of my clients are in Colorado, I do work all over the country. I think I did my first cable franchise in 1985, which was 1 year after the 1984 Cable Act. So I have been around the block a few times on these issues. We had a process here, as Kara mentioned, where each of the jurisdictions in the county basically shared resources, although your staff took the lead on both the substantive issues and herding the cats to make sure we had the opportunity to talk when we needed to speak. And then we had a number of negotiating sessions with Comcast. As you saw in the memo that I sent to you, we were starting from a form of a model agreement that Comcast agreed to a few years ago with a number of jurisdictions throughout the state through the Colorado Communication and Utility Alliance Group, of which Pitkin County is a member. And that model document grew out of a franchise negotiation in Aurora and Denver when they pooled their resources and negotiated new franchise agreements in 2014. So cable franchising generally is a kind of shared jurisdiction between local government and federal government. We're used to doing a lot of stuff where we have shared jurisdiction between state and local. In cable franchising, the state has no role. Local governments have the authority to grant franchises and make certain requirements on cable companies as compensation and consideration for the use of public rights-of-way. But we do that within a box created by federal law, and we can't require anything that's outside of that box. So what we ordinarily see in cable franchise agreements is a franchise fee, which compensates the county for the use of public rights-of-way. We have the ability to obtain PEG channels, so channels for your meetings and other programming, and you have the agreement with Grassroots for the programming that they do in the county. Also the requirement to, or the ability to require compensation or funding for capital equipment related to the PEG programming. What has changed over the years, some local authority has been taken away by Congress. We only have the authority to, and by the state actually for that matter, we are limited to franchising for cable. So while you have Comcast as the provider and they offer internet service and they offer voice telephone service and cable video service, the franchise only covers the video part of it. I would venture to say if you get complaints from your constituents, some of those complaints are about internet. Some of them might be about phone. Those are not addressed in the cable franchise. The cable franchise is only to video, and even there, some of the things that local governments used to have control over 15 years ago, like rate regulation, we don't have anymore. So one of the complaints you might get about video is either my rates are too high or why can't I just buy the programs that I want to watch? Unfortunately, the answer is If you don't like it, call your congressman because Congress has taken that authority away from us on the local level. What we have in this new franchise, and I highlighted the key issues in the memo, and I'm not going to go through all of them unless you have specific questions, but we basically upgraded the definition of gross revenues. The county receives 5% of the cable gross revenues. And I have seen that defined very narrowly in franchises where it's just what subscribers pay for their cable service, but it can also be the rental fees for the boxes, the converter boxes. It can be extra services that they buy through the cable system like pay-per-view. It can be advertising revenues. Comcast has a national advertising program where they advertise cable companies. Some of those revenues are generated from Pitkin County subscribers. All of those under our definition fall into the definition of cable gross revenues, so it creates essentially a slightly bigger pie from which the county gets 5% of those gross revenues. One of the things we wanted to accomplish in this in the joint franchise negotiation is of the 4 jurisdictions, 2 of them currently do not impose a PEG fee for the capital costs for PEG programming, and that would be Snowmass and Basalt. Both of those jurisdictions have agreed to start doing that, so now we will have every jurisdiction in the county that is sharing in the grassroots operation, generating revenue from their cable company that will, they can either use it for, and the county can use its PEG fee for if you need to upgrade these microphones. You can do that if there are contributions made by all of the jurisdictions to grassroots. You can, for their equipment, you can do that.
Rachel has a question.
Yes.
Just, can you give us what the acronym PEG?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. PEG is Public, Education, and Government Access Channels.
Thank you.
So,
for the audience, viewing audience.
Yeah, that's we sometimes get caught up in our acronyms, and I
Very
will,
familiar with that.
yes,
Okay,
try to
thank you.
remember to stay away from those. The other big issue that we had, and it relates to the public education and government access channels, is that we have high definition channels today. We did not have high definition channels the last time you did a franchise agreement. Cable companies don't particularly like to give high definition channels to local governments, and it's really a management of their business situation. If you think about a regular digital channel in standard definition, you know, it uses a certain amount of bandwidth, and a high definition channel uses more bandwidth. If you think about it, there's really no such thing anymore as a cable company or a telephone company. They're all broadband companies, and voice is just an app on a broadband system, and video is just an app on a broadband system. So that bandwidth that Comcast is giving to Pitkin County for a high-definition channel is bandwidth that they could otherwise monetize on their system, either through their internet service or through some other service. They could lease it to a company that wants to obtain more, you know, a new channel on the cable system. And when I say they don't like to give it away, it's for that reason, but they will provide it if the local governments can demonstrate that there really is a need for it and that it will be used. The last thing they want to do is provide a high-definition channel and then have it not be used. Fortunately, there's a great track record in this county of public education and government access programming. So I've seen a lot of communities of the combined size of the 4 jurisdictions we're talking about negotiate really hard and get 1 high-definition channel. We were able to get 2. The first one will be activated within 120 days after the franchise. The other, we have agreed to wait 2 years into the franchise term in order to get that. Comcast wanted some additional time before they have to give up that, bandwidth. Initially, they were going to give us a second HD channel in 1 year. They were also going to give us a grant for equipment to help upload programming to the internet. This was, again, something that grew out of these negotiations a few years ago in Denver and Aurora when they said, we want to have our programming on demand. Comcast didn't want to do that, again, because of the capacity it would take on their servers, and for every community that they serve in Colorado, they said they couldn't do it. I've never seen a cable company before that negotiation be willing to do something internet-based in a franchise, because usually they are the ones who tell you, don't get into the internet, you're not allowed to put that in our franchise. But in that case, what they offered was, why don't we help, in that case it was Aurora and Denver, get your programming online, and we'll give you some money to help you buy a server, because it takes capacity to get that programming uploaded. We'll also provide you a commercial-grade internet access connection, because that takes bandwidth to do this, and your IT department has other uses for the bandwidth that you currently pay for. What they've done since then is they've given those kinds of grants to individual cities and counties, usually in smaller amounts if it's a smaller community, and they propose to give us $10,000. I think when they did Summit County a couple of years ago, and Summit County also has a shared programming, but they don't do nearly as much as Grassroots does. They got a $15,000 grant, and we said we want 20. They offered us 10, we want 20. We eventually said to them, if we wait another year and do that HD channel after the second year, will you up the grant to $20,000? And they eventually said yes. So that was one of the last issues that we got to. So we now have the ability to spend some additional money that they're going to give us on equipment. And of course, if your programming is on the web, then you don't have to be in Pitkin County watching Channel 11 or in Basalt on Channel 17 to see the programming. If you have a broadband connection anywhere in the world, you can watch your local government access programming.
And what is the benefit to us and to our viewers of having high def?
Well, from a technical standpoint, high definition is higher quality video.
So they can just look closer at us as we're sitting.
Right. There have been many jokes made, and I will tell you, I'm a former local elected official as well. I was the mayor of Arvada for a number of years. So we have gone through Joseph. Do you really want to see the mayor in high definition? Probably not.
That's kind of where I was going.
Right. But here's what I think the real benefit is. If you have, I don't know if you are subscribers of cable or satellite, but if you have high definition, you know that the standard definition channels are in one group of numbers, channel 2, channel 4, channel 7, 9, right? The high definition channels on the Comcast system are like 652, 738, 7.
Way out there.
Right? Once you are a high definition subscriber and you're scrolling around, a lot of people watch the government programming because they're scrolling through this and they say, oh, it's my county commissioner meeting, and they're like, I'm interested in that, and they listen for a little while, or they watch for a little while. Same with city council meetings. So one of the benefits is just getting the high definition channel into that upper category of channels where high definition viewers, when they're scrolling through, may more easily find it. And the other is really just the technical quality. It's better programming. And I would tell you, I mean, I joked about, do you really want to see your elected officials in high definition? But the programming that the community does, just about community events, it's in much higher quality, and it's better to watch.
But you have to have a high def TV too.
You have to have a high def TV, which is why we're in this interim period technology wise, where cable operators are being asked to keep the standard definition PEG channels, but also give us high definition channels. Eventually, everything's going to be high definition. You know, it's going to be like the transition from black and white to color.
Right.
When color TV came around, we didn't just not have black and white TVs. We had one color TV and two black and white TVs, or Aunt Sarah had a black and white
Everybody
TV.
went to the guy with the color TV.
So what you want that your citizens that still have standard only to be able to continue to watch these channels, and you want your citizens who are high definition viewers to more easily find these channels and be able to see it in higher quality. So that was one of the big issues that we had in this negotiation.
Rachel?
I was just going to add that if you have a high def television and the only channel you can watch is low definition, it's actually much lower quality. So if you have the high-def TV and you turn on Channel 12 today, it's actually shakier than if you had a standard TV watching Channel 12 today.
So anyway, these issues related to the public education and government access channels were really the biggest issues that we had.
Right, and we appreciate that effort.
in the franchise. There were some other issues that involve more technical language and how we will deal with another operator if there's ever a competitor that comes here and wants to offer a competing cable service, and there's upgrades in language and how we do audits and what kind of records they have to keep, which is very important in communities that will do a periodic audit to see if they're getting the money that they're entitled to receive. And overall, it's we were able to improve the language in most of the areas where we have authority to do that, and we have an agreement that we feel comfortable recommending to you. I know that Snowmass has had their study session on this, and they look like they're going to go forward at their February meetings and approve the franchise. I am going to be visiting and studying in work session today with the Aspen City Council and with the Basalt Town Council, so if those go well, hopefully they will also move to adoption over the next couple of weeks, and then we'll be good to go.
So we would be the first to adopt if we move forward tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay. George.
What would be some of the issues that perhaps one of our other fellow jurisdictions wouldn't support or would question, whether it be Snowmass or Basalt or City? And I'm assuming that it's all or none in this.
Well, to your second question first, if there was a community-specific issue that came up, we might be able to resolve that without impacting the other franchises. And in fact, the issues of public education and government access channels in Basalt are different than they are in the other communities, because they are the one community that whose video is not fed from the head end of the Comcast system that is in Aspen. So it would cost a lot of money to upgrade their facilities in Basalt to provide a live high-definition feed. So what they're going to do in Basalt is they will tape their council meetings in high definition when they are, and then they will provide that tape to here or to Grassroots.
Grassroots, yeah, and
right.
CGT.
And then they'll be seen basically on a rebroadcast,
High def.
But they will not get their own high-definition channel for live government access right off the bat. Now, if something changes technologically in the coming years, we looked at talking to some of the, Eagle County is just starting to do their renewal now. I'm not involved in that, but that Basalt is in that area where they've got residents in both counties. Once they get outside of the municipal limits, there may be a way, if there's going to be an upgrade through the Eagle County negotiations, to help Basalt out. So that's one example. And now I've forgotten your first question.
What would be some of the issues that might arise? You mentioned Basalt specifically.
Right.
The town of Snowmass, I caught a little bit of their work session the other night, and they seem to have a lot of questions. I'm not sure because they just weren't aware of what the service is that the contract entailed.
I think part of it was they had a couple of council members who actually read this whole thing really carefully, and it's got a lot of esoteric stuff in it, and they asked questions about some of those things. They actually did have a good question about levels of insurance coverage and whether the levels of coverage were high enough. And I went back and looked at them, and initially it was $1 million per occurrence and $1 million aggregate, which is really not that much. And I thought to myself, how can that be? And I went back and looked at the Denver franchise, and sure enough, that's what they've agreed to, and that's what all these other jurisdictions in Metro Denver have agreed to. But it doesn't make sense. It should be larger. And when I talked to Comcast about that, what they told me was they have $25 million in coverage. So regardless of what we put in the franchise, if one of their trucks knocks over a pole, we've got a big lawsuit, there's plenty of insurance coverage. But they also said, if you would be comfortable with having a $3 million aggregate instead of a $1 million aggregate, we'll do that. So we did, and we did it in all of the franchises. issue that I think came up that required a little bit of discussion in Snowmass is because they're one of the communities that does not currently impose a PEG fee. So this is going to be a new fee. The thing to remember about these fees, whether it's a franchise fee or a PEG fee or sales tax or any other government-imposed charge, federal law allows, doesn't require, but allows cable companies to pass those charges through to subscribers and to put them as a line item on the bill.
Right.
Which they always do because they like to make it seem like we're not making you pay this. This is your government making you pay this. When in fact, from a legal standpoint, the cable contract, the franchise, is a contractual obligation that they pay an amount to the county equal to 50 cents per subscriber per month. Whether they pass that through, whether they build it into their rate base, whether they put it, that's up to them, but we're not making them
That's their choice.
do anything. And I will tell you that in another community, in another part of the state, that never had a franchise fee before, so we get 5%, they wanted to start having a franchise fee, which they absolutely have the legal right to impose. Comcast had a terribly hard time with that, even though they were legally obligated to do it. And part of the concern was they know that they raise their rates every year. And they were wondering, well, you know, we got to raise our rates. And if we add this new charge that the counties
Raise them higher.
or that the local government's going to charge us, then yes, will the people be able to swallow that? So it ended up getting phased in over a period of time. But look, so the issue in those two communities was, yes, this is an obligation you can impose on the cable company, but understand they will in turn put that on the bill, and you may get some calls from citizens wondering, you know, why my cable fee went up. If someone calls the Comcast office, they're supposed to be told, this is a fee that the city imposes on us, and we have the ability under federal law to pass it through to our customers. Oftentimes what customer service representatives have said in the past is, oh, the city imposed, you know, made us do that. So then the mayor gets a phone call. So it was really a getting them comfortable with what that 50-cent fee means and how it might impact them and what kind of phone calls they might get once it goes into effect. In essence, it's a pretty minimal amount to help cover the costs of that programming. When I've been involved with other communities that have looked at raising that fee or imposing it for the first time, you know, every cable program, that's not owned by Comcast, right? They have all, you know, they own NBC Universal, but for companies that they don't own that puts programming on their system, they have to pay for that. ESPN is the most expensive. The biggest chunk of your cable bill is ESPN. Mm-hmm. And ESPN usually tells cable companies, if you want ESPN, you're going to take ESPN 1, ESPN 2, ESPN 3, ESPN University, ESPN in Spanish, and you're going to put them all on there. And there's a cost for each one. The Home and Garden channel, not quite as expensive, right? CNN, all of those things, they pay for. I think ESPN is somewhere in the $9 or $10 range right now per month. Some of those other not so popular niche channels are more like $1 or $2 per month. So 50 cents per month for the programming that is provided to the citizens of this county through all of these public education and government channels, pretty minimal compared to the quality that they get. And again, cable companies are willing to do that when they believe that there is a benefit to what the communities are doing. And I will give Comcast credit. They were, I mean, these weren't easy issues, but when we pushed hard and said this is very important to the county and to the municipalities in the county, they heard us and they listened to us. And when we needed them to move a little bit further to get this thing to the finish line, they did. So I appreciate that. I probably should say, because I know he's not here, Andy Davis is the government affairs representative for Comcast. He may or may not come to your meeting tomorrow. He knew that I was meeting with 3 of the jurisdictions, and he really wanted to come, but they were having some kind of all-hands-on-deck meeting for everybody in Comcast, and he couldn't get away today. So it was a difficult negotiation at times, but a good negotiation, and I think we were treated fairly, and and we're happy with the agreement.
Is that why it's taken quite some time to get to this point? Or there are other issues that came up along the way? Because
one of the issues that I mentioned in the memo, the competitive equity issue, which used to be called level playing field, that was language that was one of 3 issues. When Denver and Aurora did their franchise, it took 2 years to negotiate that. 3 of the issues in the franchise took 18 months. Everything else took 6 months. And this competitive equity was one of those. Based on some changes in technology and sort of what a cable company is, and we needed to change some of that language to protect the county and the municipalities. Comcast was not too happy about that, and it took us a little bit of time to work that out. But frankly, the other reasons for it taking time, sometimes it was Comcast with other stuff that they were busy with, and we had to wait for them. But sometimes it was us, and
we know how that goes.
You know, we had 2 or 3 jurisdictions that gave us feedback, and we had to wait 2 months to get from the last one before we could get back to them.
And it's my understanding that the county attorney, that Ryan Neely, has been involved in this process. So, because I mentioned it to John Neely, and then I found out it was Rye who had been handling this. So he will be here at tomorrow's meeting, Rye?
I talked to him. I can make sure he was at the meeting. He
I
also
just think
said
since,
if you guys had any questions for
yeah, I just think since the contract is now in our packets for tomorrow, and I personally haven't had a chance to review all of your contract is like a pretty significant chunk of our packet. So I don't know if any questions about it. It'll be great if Rye could be here, and we really appreciate your making the effort to be up here today to talk with us.
Glad to be here. If you have any trouble sleeping tonight, I highly recommend this.
Reading that? Okay, I'll work on that. Rachel?
Yeah, let me ask a question kind of generally. Does this create exclusivity with use of our right-of-ways only for Comcast, or if there was another provider that we could enter into dual agreements or things like that?
Really good question. Actually, federal law prohibits exclusive contracts, and there is language in here that we are granting a non-exclusive right to use the rights-of-way. The FCC has done a number of things over the years, and some of the changes in the federal law that Congress has done have purportedly been to incent competition and to create more competition, but from a purely business standpoint, it costs a lot of money to put in the infrastructure to run wires to every residence and every business to provide this kind of a service. And there's just not a market, even in the highly dense areas, there's oftentimes not a market for competitive cable services, which is why we don't see a lot of competition in cable. So it's not a monopoly, it's not exclusive, but a lot of times it turns into a de facto monopoly. One of the things Comcast will tell you, and I think there's some merit to this, is that we have a lot more competition with other sources of video programming that don't have to pay because they don't use the rights-of-way. So if you're a satellite user or what we refer to now as over-the-top programming, if you have an internet connection and you have Hulu or Netflix or Apple TV, you don't have to, those companies don't use the rights-of-way. The internet companies use the rights-of-way, but we can't charge them because the state has taken that right away from us. So Comcast often reminds us that you're making us pay for this, but our competitors don't have to pay. And there's some truth to that. I really think that the cable TV model as we know it today is going away. I think, and I've said this to other of my local government clients in this general time frame, this is probably the last cable franchise you're ever going to do. Because I think what's coming is more over-the-top programming, and I think we're going to get to a point where people will order the programming that they want, and that's what they'll pay for, and they'll get it over the web, and we're not going to have this traditional cable model of packages of programming that get delivered over a proprietary box that you have to hook up in your house.
Yeah.
How long does this contract go for then?
10 years, I think?
10 years. So,
right.
As you say,
Got
this
some
will
time
probably
to
be the
transition.
last time we.
Right. Right. You'll be term limited, and I'll be retired. So it's our last cable franchise.
Not necessarily. Yeah, baby. Greg.
That was the question I was going to get to. Is it seems like this is an agreement for something that's going to be going away, and are you able to chart the change in the amount of income revenues through this, through agreements such as this as we go forward? What can we anticipate revenue decreasing by a certain amount?
I think you can, and I think you actually raise a good point, and I probably should have thought of it independently. Along with my prediction that cable franchising is going away, I don't see another source to replace that revenue, given that the state has preempted us from charging other users of the rights-of-way for broadband services. So I would suggest to the people in the finance department to anticipate a time, sometime in the next 5 or 10 years, where that money is not going to be here anymore. Now, if you look at their number, the county, because they get franchise fee reports and PEG fee reports, where we get 50 cents per subscriber, county has records of how many subscribers they had in the last quarter of 17 and the third quarter of 17, and we can go back, and I don't know what that trend is, but if it's similar to the rest of the country, it's probably trending down a little bit in the number of subscribers. The franchise fees have not really gone down. They've been kind of stagnant, but that's because cable prices have gone up. So I don't know that they can keep going up and they can sustain the model for what people are willing to pay. Well, they can keep going up. I don't think they can keep going up at the same rate they've been going up. So my prediction would be that franchise fee revenues are going to start going down over time. And again, eventually, and I just can't tell you how long it's going to take, they're going to go away. And unless the law changes, we're going to have to look for another place to generate that kind of revenue.
I think it's interesting to follow up on that Comcast, is pointing out that they have to compete with groups that are using the internet, but meanwhile they also have an docked internet service right next to this as part and parcel, and they're making money on that, and they don't have to share it.
Right, so, and they'll be and when they get to the point of selling the programming over the internet in these kind of packages like Hulu and Netflix, they will probably try to get to where they don't have to start paying a franchise fee for that. Here's their dilemma now, though. The way the cable a cable operator is defined under federal law, it's a multi-channel video programming distributor, so a company that provides multiple channels of programming that is delivered over infrastructure that uses public rights-of-way that the company either owns or controls. So even if they were to move all of their programming to some internet-based thing, they still own the infrastructure, and they're providing these packages of programming. So I'd be able to make the argument that you're still a cable company and you still require a cable franchise. And they understand that. Whereas if ABC programmer, ABC is a TV station, XYZ programmer signed a deal with Comcast Business Services to get a certain amount of capacity on the Comcast broadband network, and then they started offering subscribers in Pitkin County, if you go to this web link and you sign up for our service, you can get 28 programs from us. All you need is an internet subscription from Comcast. That's not a cable company, because the company that's providing the programming doesn't own or control the infrastructure that uses the rights-of-way.
This is a state regulation that we can't charge.
Yes, it was a brilliant move that the industry was able to pull off in 1996 when we weren't using the term broadband in we were talking about the telecommunications superhighway, or the information superhighway in 1996, and everybody had cable, but nobody had these other services, and the industry went to the legislature and got this bill that preempted any government charges other than the cost of a permit process. So if they want to trench in the streets, they have to pay whatever it costs for the inspector to go out there and make sure they do the work right. And they exempted cable services from that bill. The reason they did that was because everybody had a revenue stream from cable at the time, and they would have every mayor and county commissioner down there screaming at them if they tried to take cable away. But nobody was really focused on these new services that were coming. So it was like 2 or 3 of us, somebody from the municipal league, somebody from Colorado counties, a city councilwoman from Denver and me fighting against this thing, and we really got our butts kicked in that session. And then Denver challenged that law under a home rule claim and said, you can't tell us we can't charge for the use of our rights-of-way. And the Supreme Court voted 7-0 against Denver. Wow. So that law is pretty hard and fast, and unless it changes, we're stuck.
Interesting.
Thank you for that.
Rachel.
Interesting. Yeah, you know, you think back about what promises were there from the internet, and you know, I had this. There's going to be this vast library of all this information, all the movies ever made, and now half of them charge you $4.99 for a rental of a movie that used to be on CBS 25 years ago. You know, it's not as if you're accessing this library. It's all a pay for fee for services. So I think there was a little bit of bait and switch with the general public. I mean, not that that's a editorial comment on my side. The one thing also I think has really risen to the top for a lot of us is the whole net neutrality issue. And those are not the types of demands that you can make in a franchise agreement, that you do not slow down or prefer one site over another for loading.
Right, because that's purely internet. So for that reason, we can't put it in a franchise. You may have read, if you read about some of these issues with net neutrality, there's a number of states that are starting to pass laws to require net neutrality kinds of practices. The FCC rulemaking that did away with the net neutrality rules purports to preempt states or local governments from doing that. And there are about 17 attorneys general led by the New York Attorney General that have filed a lawsuit to challenge the net neutrality rules. Our Attorney General chose not to join that lawsuit.
That could change soon.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, not to join that lawsuit, to challenge
but it could change soon.
Right. Right. So there was talk of at least one of our state senators had a press release a few weeks ago saying that she was going to introduce net neutrality legislation. I haven't seen it yet, but we might see that discussion down in Denver. And there are some things that I think come outside of the FCC order that the state could do if they wanted to encourage it. I mean, the state buys a lot of service. Mm-hmm. And the state could basically say, we're only going to buy service from companies who promise to abide by these principles. It's an election year. Who knows what's going to happen?
Well, Rachel, isn't CCI looking at something having to do with that?
I think CCI is going to be bringing...
Which is Colorado County Zinc for the viewers. Yeah. I know you know.
Right,
but
yeah.
They do not have policy on net neutrality currently. Through CCAT, we wrote a letter to express our desire to see net neutrality continue. But of course it was looked over, and we sent that to Bennett and our congressional delegation to ask that they hold hearings across Colorado so that we would know what the impacts of this could be. And, you know, as I've said before, me or others may have thought of it as a consumer issue. What is this? How does this affect me as a consumer? But then you start thinking about how much business the county does by internet or school districts or libraries or anything. And if they suddenly have to pay a premium just to have reasonable speeds or to be able to disseminate that information and do work with our clerk's office and motor vehicles in Denver, it could be a very costly proposition for counties and cities. And so that's what we're really asking Senator Bennett and others to hold hearings around the state and give us the full range of impacts.
I am really glad to hear you say that. We're off base from the cable franchise, but you are right all over these issues. And I will tell you, at the last CCUA, the Colorado Communication and Utility Alliance meeting, which was last week, a couple of the board members on the CCUA had said, you know, how is net neutrality or elimination of the net neutrality rules going to impact local governments? And you just articulated a number of the different areas, even the simple ones about what if the costs go way up. So our office was asked to put together a memo on the impact of the elimination of those rules on local governments, and probably within the next month, you guys will be getting a memo that they can then distribute.
I have to give credit where credit is due with Lynn Padgett, who is a public policy director in Ouray County, former Ouray County Commissioner, San Miguel County employee now, of having really brought those issues forward, and just keep networking with her.
So through that CCUA group, I have worked with Lynn on their broadband project.
I'm sure.
And with CCI, and we've got, there's some bills at the legislature coming up next week that we're, concerned about for rural broadband. That's one of the benefits of being in a group like that CCUA group, is that you're on top of those issues. They also have their own lobbyist that's working with Eric Bergman at CCI and the folks at the Municipal League.
I'll hear about it at Thursday's Northwest Colorado Council of Governments meeting from Nate.
And I'm going to go to the
and now there's a network issue there. I just actually we may be talking to each other more because Barbara Green, the general counsel for the COG, asked me to help on that project. So
and I'll be going to that breakfast on Thursday morning with the legislators for the cable industry.
So getting back to our franchise agreement here. So we have it coming before us tomorrow. The whole contract is in our packet for some light reading for this evening. We hope to have Ryan Neely here, who's been working on it with staff. Are there any other questions specific to this, or?
Just one question, and maybe we'll reiterate tomorrow if necessary. Because the law is set up so that if a agreement expires, you just continue the old agreement. Without a new franchise agreement, they continue to operate under the old terms, and none of the new benefits flow to the county. So there's just like no incentive to not do it.
Right.
And we've pretty much gotten as much out of them as we can.
January 31st, 2018, does this existing one have to be renewed again for, I remember seeing that date float through here.
Well, it would be effective as of January 1, which we're going to backdate all of these to January 1.
If we approve tomorrow, and we have 2 readings, though, correct?
2 readings.
Right.
So it won't be finalized. Second readings February 14th.
Yes, Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Okay. So anything else?
And just to clarify, I think it was in the packet, but the HD channel coming on board is 120 days after signature, just to add confusion to it. So
is what?
It'll come online 120 days after signature. So
to give them some time to, and then the second HD channel will be 2 years down the line.
Right.
Okay. Thank you again. Anybody else? No, and we appreciate your taking the time again to drive up here and be safe driving back down there.
Thanks. Well,
after all your meetings up here.
I hope you get lots of snow, but I appreciate not having to deal with it on the drive.
We'll have it, I think, Friday. Yeah, hopefully. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Does the board have anything else? John? Anybody else? Anything good to go? So we'll be here tomorrow at noon? All right, see you then. Thank you, Grassroots.
Thank you, Grassroots.
And I will be at my workforce.